Welcome to Phrasal Verb Practice. This is the place to learn real English, one phrasal verb at a time. My name is Marissa, and I'll walk you through this learning journey. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing great. Today, we're diving into the phrasal verb figure out. So let's start with what figure out means. First, we use figure out when we talk about understanding something. When we say figure out, we mean that you understand an idea, a situation, or some information, usually after thinking about it for a bit. For example, I finally figured out the instructions. She can't figure out why the app isn't working. Now, another very common use of figure out is about finding a solution or an answer. Basically, you think, analyze, and then you solve the problem. For example, we need to figure out a solution quickly. He figured out how to fix the error. There's one more way we often use figure out. We also use it when we're trying to decide something. So here, figure out means making a decision after thinking it through. For example, let me figure out what to do next. They're trying to figure out their travel plans. Here's the key idea that connects all of these uses. Every time we use figure out, there's thinking involved. You think, you process, and then you understand, solve, or decide. Now, just quickly, what does figure out mean in other languages? In Spanish, it's entender, resolver, descifrar. In French, comprendre or résoudre. In Portuguese, entender or resolver. In Italian, capire or risolvere. In German, herausfinden or verstehen. In Japanese, rikkei suru or geiketsuru. And in Chinese, nong mengbai or shangchu. So when do people usually use figure out? People use figure out when they don't understand something at first, when something feels confusing, when there's a problem to solve, when they need to make a decision, or when they're learning how something works. Let's look at a few quick examples to summarize. I can't figure out this question. She figured out the answer on her own. We need to figure out a better plan. He's trying to figure out what he wants. Did you figure out how the system works? Now let's talk about the grammar, but in a simple way. Figure out is a separable phrasal verb. That means the object can go after it or in the middle. For example, figure out the problem. Figure the problem out. But here's something important. When you use a pronoun like it or them, it must go in the middle. So we say, figure it out. And we do not say, figure out it. As for structure, it's usually figure out plus a noun, or figure out plus a question word, like what or how. For example, figure out the issue. Figure out how it works. All right, now let's practice. First, you're going to hear a short text from everyday life. Then, you'll hear another text in a professional or office setting. Are you ready? Let's start. This morning started like most mornings, with me standing in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, trying to figure out why it suddenly wouldn't turn on. I pressed the button twice, then unplugged it, then plugged it back in. Still nothing. While I was doing that, my phone buzzed. It was my sister asking if I had figured out what time we were meeting later. I hadn't. So I told her I'd figure out my schedule after breakfast. Once I finally figured out that the coffee maker wasn't broken, just empty, my day felt a little easier. Small wins matter. After that, I sat down to check my messages and tried to figure out which ones actually needed a reply right away. Some could wait, some couldn't. Later in the afternoon, I met a friend for a walk. She was talking about a situation at work and said she was trying to figure out what her boss really wanted from her. We walked slowly, going over the details, helping her figure out her next step. Sometimes just talking helps you figure out things you couldn't see on your own. In the evening, my parents called. They were planning a short trip and couldn't figure out where to stay. We went through a few options together until they finally figured out what made the most sense for them. Nothing fancy, just something comfortable. By the end of the day, I sat on the couch, thinking about tomorrow. There were still a few things I hadn't figured out yet, like what to cook for dinner or when to run errands. But that was okay. Not everything needs an answer right away. Sometimes you just take it one step at a time and trust that you'll figure out the rest as you go. Great, that was the first text. How many times did you hear the phrasal verb of the day? Now, let's move on to the second text. The week started with a quick team meeting, the kind where everyone has a coffee in hand and a lot of questions in the air. Our manager opened by saying we needed to figure out why the last release was delayed. No blaming, just understanding. As we talked through the timeline, it became clear that we still hadn't figured out where the communication broke down between teams. After the meeting, I sat with a colleague to review a few emails. We tried to figure out what the client was really asking for, because the message wasn't very clear. We read it twice, then once more out loud, and finally figured out that they wanted a small change, not a full redesign. That saved us hours of work. Later that day, another issue came up. A new task had been added to the project, and no one knew who was responsible. We had to figure out who had the right background to handle it. After a short discussion, we figured out that it made sense for me to take it, since I was already familiar with the data. In the afternoon, my manager stopped by my desk and asked if I had figured out a solution for the reporting issue. I told her I was close, but still needed time to figure out the best approach. She appreciated the honesty and gave me space to think it through. By the end of the day, we regrouped as a team. We had finally figured out the main problems, agreed on next steps, and figured out how to avoid the same issues in the future. It wasn't perfect, but everyone felt calmer. Sometimes work is just about taking things step by step and trusting that, together, you'll figure out what needs to be done. Great, that was the second text, and that's all for today. Thank you so much for following this channel, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.